Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Azazel Jacobs, the writer and director of the Netflix original film His Three Daughters. The first thing I wanted to ask you about this is the cast, the central three cast members of this, so Carrie Coon, Natasha Lyonne, and Elizabeth Olsen, are just all fantastic in this film. And I was curious as to, was any one of the three sisters, did you find it more challenging to cast one of the three sisters than it was to cast the other ones? Or I'm curious about that.
Yeah, no. Well, first off, thank you for speaking with me. No, I think I was about 15 or 20 pages into the script when I realized I was writing for the three of them, and all three of them I had worked with or I had a direct relationship with. So I had worked on Sorry for Your Loss with Elizabeth Olsen. I'd done 2 episodes of that show, so it's how I also knew Giovanna Depo, who I also wrote with in mind. Carrie Coon married to Tracy Letts, who I made The Lovers with, who's also in French Exit. And then Natasha Lyonne and I really just kind of crossed paths enough to know that I was able to like directly reach out to her, that I had her email. So it was in the back of my mind um, that I was writing with them and that I could just go directly to them at the same time. And I really sent the script simultaneously to all four of them, um, including Giovanna Depo. And I think one of the things that I did know, or I had a suspicion of, is that they were equally fans of each other's, besides like wanting to work with me. So it really wasn't one of these things. It was just like, I'm going to start with this dream at the very top and not even think of a plan B or like what could be challenging or difficult, and just went straight to them. And luckily they really responded immediately.
And the other thing I'm curious about is, did this film come from anywhere personal for you, in terms of possibly a relationship with your parents or an experience you had with your family?
Yeah, it is a very personal film, but not only with my own family, but just um with close friends as well, that I have been close enough that invited me into this process as they've been losing somebody. And so it never I understood it to be a universal experience, but it never stopped feeling very strange and kind of wrong and bizarre. And so while it was personal, it was also something that like I just couldn't understand, and I was trying to approach in a way, through film, in a way that I can understand, or at least have some idea of control or some semblance of order, in the way that the reality of it has been. And I'm still going. My parents are alive, but um, it's been a process that I've been living in for quite a while, and it was a way for me to bring something that I love to do, making films, into something that's really been uh, quite challenging.
Did you find that I find that for a lot of people, the issue of palliative care and end of life care is a very tough one for people to even just talk about, even though it's something that becomes so central for pretty much everybody in life. Do you hope that maybe that this can maybe like ease some of the tension and stigma that some people might have in terms of at least just talking about these types of things?
Yes, though I still find it really difficult. Even when you ask me that question, I'm like, it's hard for me to talk about. So it's easy for me to say, like, yeah, I'd love for people to feel more free about it, but it's so personal. It's so deeply like yours, that even how to even say those words. And I think there's something about just the word of hospice that you go, it feels like you're dooming somebody, like. And so just like anything else that you feel like you don't, it's not even that you're not addressing reality, you don't want to bring that reality into it. Now, one of the things that's been amazing for me, just like in terms of just like my own experience, I did not really understand that like the palliative care is has much as much to do, if not more, with extending life, and equality, and potentially in a good quality, rather than just like ending it without pain. In this case, I think with a lot of families, in the case of his three daughters, they're really bringing in the hospice nurse at the very end when everything else has been tried, and this is the stage that we're in. And that's definitely something that I've experienced as well. But I think the one joining thing that I feel like I hope people walk away with this, even though Angel, the hospice nurse, is definitely like a character of a certain type, and the sisters kind of bond over making fun of him. Is like I find the people that do this work kind of just absolutely incredible across the board. Like I think that they're amazing people, and so I hope that's something that that does come across as well in this film. That I have a true admiration of them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even like what you were saying with, saying hospice. I'm the son of a nurse, so that's why I automatically went to palliative instead of hospice. It's all about the
Same,
wording.
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I use that word all the time because that other word is just terrible. It's just like it's terrifying. It's just absolutely terrifying. So I use it. It just sounds palliative sounds good. It just sounds like help.
Yeah, it just sounds more it sounds just more technical rather than like a diagnosis that's inevitable.
You're so right.
Um, I think one of the more interesting things about the film is the fact that we throughout most of the film we don't actually see the character of the father, even though he's so central to everything that is happening in the movie. And I was wondering what made you decide that you didn't want the audience to see the father throughout most of the film.
Yeah, well, there was a few things that I just went on instinct, and other things I went with objective. So I knew that going into a room and doing a dying scene was something that I didn't feel comfortable with being able to do in a good way. And I've seen it done, right? I've seen it done in wonderful ways that are very convincing. But that was something that A, I wasn't too interested in, and B, I was just yeah, maybe it just wasn't my interest in, and I just also wouldn't feel confident doing. Like I feel like there's a lot to suddenly you're dealing with old age makeup and doing sickness and take one and take two and variations of sickness, and I think living inside of it um has made me especially wary of trying to like play act death in that way, uh at least personally. And so I knew going into it that going into the room, not going into the room would really keep the focus about what this story is truly about, which is about family and who's left behind, and what is family after somebody that's is gone is potentially they could join, and then the joining factor between siblings. Like what are our relationships are after our parents are gone, and how do we establish that? How do we even think about those things ahead? And I really felt like that's more than anything what this story was the meditation on.
It's interesting in in one of your previous answers, you brought up the character of Angel, and I think he's such an interesting character because I think when I was watching the movie and I was taking some mental notes, I think the term I used to describe Angel was frustratingly cryptic a lot of times, and I'm curious as to what made you structure his character in that manner.
Well, I very much wanted this to be a working class film. Like the father is clearly it's a working class apartment, it's a working class job that the father has had, and I also saw the angel approaching this job this with this balance of like this is the work, this is how he supports his own family, he supports himself. But he has to also he's drawn to this for personal reasons. So he has to have this balance of being able to invest himself and also be there emotionally as best as he can for families, but also he's going to another family another hour from this. And he has to also know how to not get drawn into something. And that was, um, Rudy Galvin, who plays Angel. That was our biggest discussion, which was like how to approach this balance between a job that you're passionate about and people that you care about, but also how to protect yourself. Um, and the truth is like they don't have an answer. We're looked at as an answer, like we're looking for professionals, and I think all of us have dealt that with doctors, where we go, oh, these people are trying things. Sometimes they're informed guests. That they've had like, but all we're relying on is their experience, but not necessarily that is going to apply to what we're going through. So the crypticness was like a way for me to both. I mean, I try to approach this film, especially with a lot of humor, because that's the way that I do approach, uh, I think, both life and death. That's just something that's a constant. I feel like at least my experience, that's been a big part of it. It's been a lot easier to laugh at certain things than to just cry. And there's only so much that you can cry, but you can usually continue to laugh about certain things. So Angel's playing a balance. He's playing a kind of person that's, yeah, he's definitely is saying cryptic things, both kind of are concerning and also very curious. And at the same time, he's always trying to come from a place of like also being empathetic and being supportive.
I also I love how so much of everything just almost everything just takes place in that little space of that apartment. And I'm was wondering, was that like an actual New York City apartment that you shot in? And if so, did it ever feel claustrophobic for anyone in that shooting in such a confined space?
Yes, yes, and yes. It absolutely is. Sorry, I'm just moving my kitty for a second. Okay.
That's completely
So
okay. Mine normally does that. It's normally mine that does that, so it's completely fine.
I just throw everything off the desk. Um, Yes, so absolutely a real apartment on the Lower East Side. We shot entirely in this apartment on the Lower East Side on the sixth floor. It was one apartment out of there's 900 units actually. There's nine buildings that are all kind of conjoined. I wrote as much as I wrote for these actors. I wrote for a certain type of apartment that just growing up in New York City, I had gone to many times as a kid visiting friends' houses, and a certain type of apartment that you could feel history in the walls. Like you could feel the structure and the bones of the place. You could just feel that there was family arguments and family celebrations within these walls. And that was one of the, I guess, the balance of the playwright structure of the story was shooting in a real location, shooting in a real apartment. But all knowing that that would kind of create a certain limitation, it would create a certain amount of freedom as well, which would mean that we'd have this natural light to play with. We'd have this view. You know, you could turn on different angles in ways that, you know, let's say we shot a lot on the soundstage on French Exit, and you're trying to not shoot towards windows all the time because you're on a set and you just have a backdrop. It opens up a whole beautiful thing that you're not thinking about. Oh, I'm gonna have to do on, you know, VFX to put this light, this window behind. So suddenly had this freedom of like a real city place behind us. But yeah, the other side was the truth is that there's these actors and the whole crew, which is a pretty big crew, um, being packed into a three-bedroom apartment in New York City and shooting there for about 17 days inside the apartment and then one day exteriors. Um, so that created for sure the sense that we were getting very, very close together. I think for me personally, that was a helpful thing. I felt like I felt very connected to not only the actors but the crew, and I felt that they were connected to each other in this way that doesn't usually happen when you have lots of places you can disappear to. Like there was no place that a crew could really go out to step out that much. We were just on set, we'd show up, and then work throughout the day. So it felt confining, but for me at least, from the director's point of view, it felt really helpful and something that I now kind of treasure and miss about shooting the film.
One of the other things I found so distinctive about this film was just the way it actually looked, the way it looked on my screen as I was watching it. And I was wondering if you could go into some detail about how you achieved that look and the collaboration with your cinematographer Sam Levy.
Yeah, so Sam Levy, I had been a longtime fan of. I'd seen Wendy and Lucy, and you know, Lady Bird, and a bunch of other work that I just loved. And then I saw this special that he did called Nathaniel, the
Oh yeah,
Gerard
the Gerard
Carmichael.
Carmichael special, yes.
I just thought, wow, it had this feel to it. It was a one location. It had such a mood to it that felt so, in my own way, I very much wanted for this film. And so I approached him with Sam with the script at that point, talking, letting him know that I was definitely planning on shooting on a real location and shooting on film. But how could we achieve some of that warmth and that intimacy that he was able to in that setting that he was able to do and that special? And so a lot of our conversation was how to embrace the confines, how do we embrace the real apartment, how do we use light for our benefit, knowing that film has this kind of beautiful unpredictability that we didn't have to control so much in the way that was sometimes with video, and a lot of how do we separate the shot so that we are taking this out of the theatricalness in the way that maybe the script is. Some of the character, the sisters are performing, especially in the beginning, a certain presentation of themselves. They're presenting themselves in a certain way that slowly breaks down. How could we mimic that in the way that this was shot? So that the apartment was teased out in bits and pieces in the way that the sisters, history and relationship with each other is being teased out. How do we start getting a sense of how this place connects in the way that we also are starting to get the way that the sense of how that the sisters are connecting with each other? How do we get to a place where we really feel confined so that when we are downstairs on the bench with Rachel, that's a real release for us, that we actually need that fresh air as an audience, and something that Rachel winds up gravitating herself. At first, she's like kicked out there because her sister's telling her to, but then she winds up really wanting that place and needing that space. And we wanted to have that same feeling. Like that was a big conversation for Sam and I. Is how do we get to this place so that every time we step out, it's like, oh, yes, now we can dive back in there and get back into whatever the kind of pressure cooker of the story. Sam and I, we did lots of camera tests. We worked really closely, especially with the costumes and just different ideas that, like, even though this is an old New York City apartment, it was actually a young couple that had moved in there, and everything had been freshly painted, and the furniture was, everything had to be removed and everything painted, and all the fixings changed. Um, and just selecting what those colors are, how to isolate. Like Rachel's room has a pretty different color than every other room. How to get across this opening shot that I really wanted to kind of mimic an audition. How do we do that um and it's still feeling like a real apartment? Were conversations that luckily Sam and I, because we started so early, were able to start maybe like a year earlier and just and meet up on a weekly basis to figure out.
One last thing I was curious about is I love how Elizabeth Olsen's character, there's this frequent mention about the fact that she loves the Grateful Dead, and I'm just curious, did that come from, is that something that you're also a fan of, or was that just something that you felt was just right for the character?
Yeah, I don't know the Grateful Dead at all, but I do know a few people that the Grateful Dead have been really important to, and they've spoken to me, and I have an idea where they come from and what they had to deal with growing up and what it's meant to them, especially those shows and those gatherings. And that felt, um, yeah, that felt correct for Christina's character. Like I found, especially I think it's easy to think of like, oh, these deadheads are like, are flowery and soft and their lives are, perfect. But reality, when I now looking back at it, I understand the type of strength that takes to find something quite beautiful and connected and peaceful in the midst of the turmoil that they were going through. And so that was something that really lent itself when I was thinking about Christina and some of the things, the strength that I actually see Christina have that you don't really suppose at first.
Well, Aza, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over the next couple of months. And to all of our viewers, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to go to goldderby.com and make your predictions in advance of this year's coming award season. Thanks so much, Aza.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.